For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Let me start by wishing all of you a very good afternoon. My friend Nitin told me that I would be required to speak on transition from a world of fossil fuels to green energy, and I think thereafter, he wants me to speak on green hydrogen specifically. I want to start by placing a few self-evident truisms in front of you. One, that the objective and need to transition from a world of fossil fuels to green, sustainable energy, I suspect that decision was taken, and many of us present in this room today were part of that decision-making process in different capacities when it was a slightly simpler world. The motivation for seeking that transition emanated and was anchored in the need for ensuring that we leave the climate in a better shape, the world and the climate issues in a better shape for the next generation. And there was a fair degree of noble thought and altruism and all that. And some of that discussion took place when the energy markets in the world were more tranquil. Today, when we undertake that decision, it is against a backdrop which is far more problematic. Since this is not an audience which I am used to addressing, which is largely a domestic political audience, but I think there are some things I would say to the domestic political audience which I need to share with you as well. One is that, and before I come to that, a second self-evident truism, that if you look at any country's development and you look at its energy consumption, the two invariably proceed on a very predictable path in tandem. I mean, you can't have a country growing economically with energy consumption being static or dropping. In fact, the surest sign of problems coming is when energy consumption begins to indicate that you are heading for a recession, which is very much the case in many countries in the industrial West today. You know, when I was a student at Delhi University and I used to have a two-wheeler scooter, the price of petrol had gone up to about 1 rupees 25 paise. I don't think there was any anxiety in terms of the cost of energy. Between 1974 and 1982, the price went up by 105%. In other words, it went up from rupees 1 and 11 paise to rupees 2, 28 paise. This is diesel price. Petrol price went up from rupees 3 to about rupees 5. The increase was 56% in the 7 years or 8 years between 74 and 82. It was 36.99% between 82 and 90. It was 201% between 1990 and 98, and 105% between 98 and 2006. 2006 to 14, it was 64%. If we look at the last 8 years, 2014 to 22, the price rise was the lowest in any 8-year period. But it's still a situation which everyone needs to focus on. Let me battle inoculate you a little. In terms of figures, the world today collectively consumes 100 million barrels of crude oil in a day. India consumes presently 5 million barrels in a day. But the global consumption, global average, and India's per capita consumption show a remarkable figure. India's per capita consumption is 1/3 of the global average. But this is where you need to start sitting back and taking note. The Indian consumption is rising very fast. In the next 20 years or so, 25% of the global growth will come from India. So I expect the 5 million barrels a day that we consume to go up to 6, 6.5, 7, and so on. If you have an economy which is at $3 trillion today, consuming 5 million barrels, so it's a no-brainer. By 24, 25, when you're a $5 trillion economy, your consumption will be 6.5 to 7 million barrels a day, and then by 2030, when you expect to be a $10 trillion economy, it will be so much higher. The first motivation was to do a transition from fossil fuels to green energy because it was the right thing to do. You have to save the planet. And you have to ensure that all development is anchored in ecologically sound, green, sustainable terms. Today, when we talk of transition, you clearly mean transition from where you are today, now, to a transition to a point where the system is ecologically green and sustainable. You also have to survive the present in order to be able to make that transition. And as we are seeing in country after country, including in countries around India, issues relating to energy availability, energy security, energy affordability have become highly political in terms of the challenges which are faced. And that is understandable. So far, we have navigated in India the journey with a reasonably satisfactory rate of accomplishment, even at the height. Now let me tell you what the low points are and what the height is. You know, when the global economy and the Indian economy went into a total lockdown, that was in March 2020, the price of oil came down to about $19 a barrel. And that decision to effect the lockdown was motivated because you wanted to place a premium on life, because the pandemic you were facing, or the world was facing, was not like the pandemics that many of my colleagues whom I see here, old friends, we faced when we were posted in Geneva. H1N1, swine flu, SARS, Ebola. This was like the Spanish flu of 1918. So the immediate reaction was lockdown, save lives, place a premium on life. And then when the realization came that keeping the economy closed and lockdown would create similar problem, you started calibrating and opening. And then the oil went up to $120 plus a barrel. Something that I'm often told that it is due to what happened on 24th February between Russia and the Ukraine. I find it difficult to subscribe to that because the problems were there earlier. if you were to talk to the OPEC Plus, they will tell you they don't determine the price. They only determine the quantity of oil that they release. To which I make a submission that the quantity that you release also determines the price. So if there is a 1% differential between what is the demand at any given point of time and what is available, the difference can result in a 1% difference can result in an international price being $120. So I conclude my preambular interaction with you by saying that we have to survive the transition. Because if you collapse during the transition, as many countries regrettably are, you will never be able to make the transition. And surviving the transition means, as it does in India's case, we will not allow the challenges of today to undermine or weaken our resolve to go totally green in terms of the targets we set for ourselves. So we will do the transition and we will maintain our green targets. Many of my oil companies are maybe here, or some of them I can see. They have individually come up with net zero targets. And their net zero targets are far more ambitious than what the national target is. What are we doing in this, during this period? I am not going to go into individual areas, wind, solar. I have speaking notes, we can make them available. I am not going to go into some of the other issues. I want to touch on 2 or 3 areas which are directly relevant to the energy sector insofar as the petroleum and natural gas ministry is concerned. And I want to start by biofuels. When I was ambassador to Japan between 2006 and 2008, the then government set for itself the target that we would do 5% biofuel blending in 10 or 15 of our states and union territories. We did very well. We tried very hard to procure the ethanol which would be required for 5% blending. We were not able to do it. When the Modi government assumed office in 2014, the amount of ethanol from sugar that we used for blending was 1.4%. We had set ourselves a target of achieving 10% biofuel blending by November of 2022, and I'm very happy to inform you we had achieved that target a good 5-6 months before November 22. We had set ourselves a target of achieving 20% biofuel blending by 2030. We have resolved and we are sure we will achieve it by 24-25. That is 5 years earlier. Why am I saying this? I think the challenges we face in the energy, on the energy front, have introduced another imperative, which is earlier we wanted to make the transition because it's the right thing to do. Today we want to make the transition because we don't have any choice. So it's introduced an imperative into the pace at which we are making the transition. I was just appointed I was given charge of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Ministry. I had a very interesting first discussion with the US Secretary for Energy. And she said, and I quote, that it is our intention to achieve 1 for 1 for 1. What does that mean? 1 kilogram of green hydrogen produced for $1 for 1 decade. And lo and behold, very soon I found one of the captains of industry in the private sector in India making the same 1 for 1 for 1. Now, being an old world, somewhat cynical civil servant, even though I'm a minister now, I started going into the costing. And I was saying, this is all very well. Tell me, how do you do it without the state providing large doses of subsidization? Well, I came to a conclusion, and I want to share that with you, that when the going gets tough, You need to come up with innovative solutions. So, insofar as green hydrogen is concerned, what do you need? You need to bring the cost of power down, and you need electrolyzers. And I think on both fronts, we are working with breakneck speed. What does that mean? It means, in effect, that if the cost of power in the national grid, let's say, is going to take a little time in coming down, it's coming down. Solar power has come down, others have come down. Set up captive plants yourself. One of the oil companies with which I deal, which is a very successful company, they have 11 refineries. They are already working on green hydrogen in 2 of them. Now it stands to reason that you must first create the demand. Because there's no point talking green hydrogen. You must create the demand, and then once you've created the demand, you must have the capacity to supply that. But you know, governments at the end of the day, and I'm very happy to admit that, only provide an enabling environment. They have a contribution to make in designing the ecosystem, but the real action takes place amongst the entrepreneurs, including and in particular the private sector. As I said, I wanted to speak, or rather, Nitin and I agreed I'd speak only for 15 minutes and then take your question. Let me give you a small example. I was in Milan recently to attend Gastech, which is an international conference of all the gas, people involved with all aspects of it. I was very happy that a German company CEO during a meeting told me that his company, Uniper, had entered into a joint venture with an Indian company called Greenco, and that they are spending up to $6.2 billion dollars on renewable energy and green hydrogen projects, and that Greenco would be supplying them pretty soon green ammonia at $600 a ton. Now, we are already using hydrogen in our refineries, I think around up to about 54%. We just need to make sure that that hydrogen which we are using, because I keep talking about demand, will become green hydrogen. This is my view. You may not share with it, but you may not share it. I personally believe that India has a great potential for green hydrogen for 2 reasons. One is that the access we have to good sunlight and solar energy, but more, I am not convinced that green hydrogen becomes really competitively viable unless you are able to consume it where you produce it. Because the storage and transportation of green hydrogen is something that you still need to address. I mean, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. You'll come up with all kinds of things. You can put a fuel cell. But I think India is a great opportunity. And I see all our people already into entering into joint ventures for catalyzer manufacturing. I already see the mental, or rather the mindset, going in that direction. And I can quote to you what the Honorable Prime Minister said from the ramparts of the Red Fort on August 15th last year, 2021. He said, not only will green hydrogen be the basis of green growth through green jobs, but it will also set an example for the world towards clean energy transition.
As they collect their thoughts, let me ask you, Minister, the ministry that you head, of course, has the responsibility of transiting from fossil fuel to green, sustainable energy, green hydrogen, and otherwise. But this was fascinating to know that your companies are also getting into electric charging points, and you're also concurrently the Urban Affairs Minister. So, in terms of urbanization, how do you see this energy transition helping in sustainable thing?
It's even more pronounced in the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry.
Yeah.
Look, the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry also deals with urban transport.
Exactly.
So the simpler way is that if we are going to get buses plying on green hydrogen or electric buses, that's one part of the story. But the metro system, we have 785 kilometers of metro lines running. We have another 950 under construction, but that's one part. I want to go to another area. You know, we build something like 700 to 900 million square meters of urban space every year, or we produce a Chicago every year. Because of the country's size and the construction sector, this is not my figure, it's McKinsey. One of the things that the Prime Minister focused on very early was that we needed to transition from the earlier world of brick and mortar and very high toxicity coming from construction related work. So he decided to declare one full year as the housing construction technology challenge year. Full year. Based on, and we had a big event called all the companies in the world over, the leaders, invited them to India to participate by demonstrating their technologies. Based on that interaction, 53 technologies were shortlisted, cutting edge technology. And based on those 53 technologies, 6 of them were then used to have what are called glass house demonstration projects. That is, you had, lighthouse, what am I saying? Lighthouse demonstration projects. 1,000 units to be built during 1 year using that latest technology, totally green. And for those technology providers and that project to have a tie-up with a university like IITs, etc., for incubating and making it available. Nitin, the honest God's truth is that some of the private sector in India are no longer using these old technology. I mean, if you go to the leaders in this, they're using brand new technologies. I mean, I shouldn't blow my ministry's trumpet or anything, but we got the Kartavya path done in 18 months during a pandemic. We are hoping to get the parliament building completed within 22 months. Again, using the latest building technologies. And fact is, when you use technology, the vested interests which are rained against you will say this is more expensive, this is that. But because they will go out of business. It's like a good university teacher set in his old ways will be averse to newer curricula coming because his textbook doesn't remain valid. So you will have that resistance. But once people realize that you can, using modern technology with much less toxicity, you know, I periodically am invited to participate in buildings, in conferences which deal with green building technologies. Right from the plumbing system, etc. There's a revolution taking place out there. But that we are only in one part of the revolution. If you go to a country like Germany, I don't know where was it, in Davos. I mean, the car manufacturers were telling me that they will not only insist on green fuels, etc., which is happening, they will also insist on green technology for the manufacture of the auto parts. So housing, and that is a very major area. I focused on petroleum because you said transition and green hydrogen.
That's right. No, of course. Is there a question from the audience? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Sejal, and I am a third-year economics student from OP Jindal Global University.
Could you put the mic a little
Put the
closer
mic
to your...
Yeah. Mic closer.
My name is Sejal, and I'm a third-year final year economics student from OP Jindal Global University. My question is that you emphasized on climate change and the steps that India is taking towards climate change. But given the pandemic, economically, do you think climate change is the first sector we should look at to revive the economy, or would it be poverty? Since there were a lot of people who lost jobs and employment and also their houses and everything, lives.
Okay, let me take another question and then come. Okay.
Please, but just, I want to understand this. You mentioned climate change and you mentioned the pandemic.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, pandemic was not caused due to climate change. Pandemic, I think the jury is still out as to where the virus and how it came and so on. But we'll put that aside for the moment. The challenge as I see it, and what I think is our, not only are stated, but what we are implementing, is that true to our commitments on climate change and the goals that we've set for ourselves, we will achieve that transition. But that transition requires us to survive today. And that survival can come only through adjustment. Let me give you an example. If supplies of gas from one source dry up, let's say, for Europe, the choice will be to either get gas supplies for heating in the winter from another source, or the choice will be to find some other medium to provide the energy for meeting the winter requirements. So it's a question of navigating through these choices. There are no easy solutions. If the supply of energy sources as you know them were to suddenly dry up totally, you would be left with using firewood. Or let's say, if energy is not available to fuel your transport, you still have an option to riding on camels again.
They're talking about energy poverty in Europe.
No, I don't want to go to any particular world, because I think the world is also not what it appears to be. You know, I keep saying that when you are facing challenges, the solutions you'll come up with will be determined more by the entrepreneurial innovation that you are able to show up.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Divyanshi, and I'm a second-year student of public policy from StratNewsGlobal Global University. So, sir, firstly, thank you so much for making those wonderful points about how, especially, the transition to green energy and sustainability is even more pronounced in the urban affairs department, especially. So, sir, in consideration of the Urban Affairs Ministry, when we look at the metropolitan areas of our country, we often notice that there is a huge degree of concentration of the socio-economically disadvantaged groups in congested localities, which are often not in alignment with the sustainability goals that the country is so aggressively and assertively working on right now. So, sir, what would the policy suggestions from your end would be with respect to how the government of India should tackle aligning such socio-economically disadvantaged areas with green energy transition and sustainability?
First of all, we must get our sequentiality right. The areas that you refer to are somewhat pejoratively referred to as slums. I don't like the term, so the internationally accepted word is informal settlements. But why do informal settlements arise in the first instance? Because people come looking for jobs from tier 2 and 3 cities to tier 1 cities looking for work. And typically, when you are in a situation of in a developing country like India, where the overall economy is the 5th largest in the world, etc., but still per capita income is very low. So people will go looking for that. So rather than blame them, I think the fact that they live in these informal settlements in concentrations in prime land and cities is a stark reminder that there was neglect and criminal neglect, and that our policies were wrong. Because normally when people moved looking for jobs from, let's say, a rural area to an urban area, or a tier 2 and 3 city to a tier 1 city, the city must have the receptivity and the ability to provide those shelters. But the cities didn't have it, so informal settlement. But the issue is that this happened some time ago. Even now, autonomous urbanization will go on taking place. The urban population of India in 1947 was 17% of our total population. And the total population then was 350 million. In 2047, when we'll be 100 years old as an independent country, our urban population will be 870 million. The urban and it will be 50% of our population. Delhi's population in 1947 was 8 lakhs. After refugees like my previous generation came in, it went from 8 lakhs to 22 lakhs. What do you think it will be when we have the next census? Over 2 crores. But cities have to grow. Now today what has happened is, even if the urban population in India is about, say, 40% or so, less than 40%, 30% plus, but the cities are contributing nearly 75% of our GDP. So the economic growth and vitality is in the cities. That's why people come looking for jobs. And when they come looking for jobs, they're actually contributing to that economic effort. So what this government has done with great degree of success, we have what is called in situ slum rehabilitation under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Now I can give you an example. I think it is Greater Kailash, where we are coming up with 700 homes, which was informal settlement through a system of cross-subsidization and public-private partnership. The people will get a clean, decent apartment with all the modern amenities on an as-is where they live. You see, the experiment of 1975, when civil liberties were curtailed, when you took people and settled them somewhere 100 kilometers away, it doesn't work. In our kind of democracy, it's a non-starter. So this in situ slum rehabilitation is a very good system of rehabilitating. Another lesson that we learned during the pandemic, and this is something common to both of what you have said, is that a large percentage of your working population in big cities constitutes migrant workers. So we've come up with another scheme called affordable rental housing company. So there were some old houses, or industry can build houses for giving on rent to these people, etc. And again, those schemes are taking off. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, or the affordable housing scheme, I just want to conclude quickly with the statistics. We were told when the scheme started in 2015, based on demand assessments which came from the states, that we would require 1 crore to build 1 crore tenements through different 4 verticals. After we went through it, the demand kept rising, and today we have already sanctioned 1 crore 22 lakhs, out of which 1 crore and 5 lakhs have already been grounded. 65 lakhs homes have already been given to the beneficiaries. So if you take these schemes together, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana scheme, affordable housing, then what we've done for the, the street vendors, Swanidhi scheme, you take them all together, you can see that the issue of urban rejuvenation, my predecessor used to call it a renaissance, but I've not got there yet. So rejuvenation, a lot of work is being spent. And my concluding statistic is, in the 10 years of the Congress-led UPA government, the total amount of expenditure incurred on all the urban schemes put together was 1,57,000 crores in 10 years. Mr. Modi's scheme started in June 2015. In the 7 years since June 2015, the amount of expenditure incurred is over 8 times. That is 12 lakh crores. So the urban spaces are undergoing a change which is visible to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.